topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Hey, good morning and welcome. Bill Martinez here. Great to have you with us. And we've got a guest that I've been looking forward to talking with. He's the author of Flags of Our Fathers, New York Times best-selling author as well because of the book. And also he's got a new novel called Precious Freedom. It's a novel of the war in Vietnam. James Bradley, welcome to the show. Good to have you with us.
Thank you for having me, Bill.
Hey, before we get into the book, Precious Freedom, about Vietnam, I am a Vietnam era vet, a Marine. And so obviously this relates sincerely with me and this novel that you've written about Vietnam, because you bring out some things that people have long been confused about. So you've done us a big service here, James. I'm going to tell you that, number one, okay? And before we get into that, if it's okay with you, I want to talk a little bit about your background. I mean, you yourself, you're a son of two Iwo Jima corpsmen, Doc Bradley, and let me see here. Now, did you caddy for Coach Lombardi, or was it one of your relatives that did?
No, I did.
So it's all your fault, right? Okay.
My dad was John Bradley, and
Okay.
we lived in Antigo, Wisconsin. We had a cottage up at Bass Lake and at Bass Lake Country Club. Bart
yeah.
Starr and Fuzzy Thurston and Zeke Burkowski and those guys
Uh-huh.
lived up there. And they brought up Coach Lombardi, and little dumb me, carried the coach's clubs around. It wasn't like I was some big caddy giving the coach direction. I was
Right.
lugging clubs, but we called it caddying.
Yes, right, exactly. But it's amazing to have that kind of memory, right? To think about, you and Coach Lombardi, crossing paths like this. And if you would have known now, and if you'd have known then what you know now, I'm sure it'd have been interesting. And he probably would have kicked you off the bag because you would have had all kinds of questions for the coach, right?
Well, I bring up Lombardi in the beginning of the book because the American narrative of the Vietnam War, if you listen to the vets and you read the books, it's we could have won if only. If
Yes.
only the press, if only the Congress, if only the media, if only Johnson. And I went to Vietnam and I looked around and it's like, hey, the Vietnamese won this war. I thought like Vince Lombardi, the story about the Ice Bowl with the Dallas Cowboys was not that the Dallas Cowboys lost. We didn't read 100 books about how they lost. We only read the books about how the Packers won. So I thought, the Vietnamese won. I want to read all these books by Americans about how the Vietnamese won. And I couldn't find any. It's all about how we could have won.
We should have. Yeah, right.
So I'm a Vince Lombardi guy. So I'm like, hey, they won. So the shocking thing about this book, Bill, is that I'm the only American author who went to Vietnam and asked the winners, how did you win?
Right, exactly. Yeah, because when you think about the dynamics, the narrative that we were being fed here in America was totally different than what was happening at the ground level, right?
Well, see, it was this convoluted idea of the crossover point. We were going to search and destroy, and we were going to kill so many Vietnamese that there would be a crossover. After we kill this many, then they're just going to give up. They're going to say, boy, America's really powerful. But war has always been about territory. I asked the Iwo Jima vets, my first book, Flags of Our Fathers. I said, how did you know that you won the island? And he said, we took the territory. All war is about taking the territory.
Right.
But the generals in the early 1960s said, well, we can't conquer the territory in Vietnam. So what we'll do, we got these grasshoppers called helicopters, and then we'll just jump from place to place, and we can't take the territory, but we'll just jump and kill so many of them that they'll just give up. Well, the Vietnamese had been fighting invaders for 2,000 years and they never gave up. And the Americans never thought about that. And I interviewed Vietnamese who said to me when they were little kids, 15, 16, when they were in the war, they said, oh man, every time we saw a helicopter, we said, oh, thank God for the helicopter. I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, Uncle Ho taught us that the Americans use the helicopter because they can't take the territory, that they can't come down and fight. The
Right.
Americans are flying over us, but they can't come down here because we would weed them out.
Right.
And then they said, thank God for the helicopter. And I said, what do you mean? And they said, Mr. Bradley, you know, the Vietnamese airspace would be completely quiet. And then a jet would come, whoo, boom, drop a bomb. Well, that was to make a landing zone for a helicopter. So they announced in advance a helicopter was coming. And then 20 minutes later, thoop, 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 thoop. Oh, wow, it's going to land right here. And, you know, we were 15 years old with sandals and old French rifles. And we knew where the helicopter was going to land. And the helicopter would come. We'd have our rifles and it would land right there. It was the only place to land. And then we'd just shoot the bejeebers out of them. So,
Right.
Bill, my brother trained as a Marine. He enlisted, he trained Okinawa, Da Nang, Dong Ha. And years later, after he came home all shot up, I said, what happened to you, Steve? He said, well, I got on a helicopter for my first mission. We landed, I stepped out, and I got shot right next to the heart. Well, he probably got shot by a 13-year-old girl who was notified when he was coming.
Exactly.
So the Marines announced when they were coming. It was this crazy search and destroy idea that could not work.
Right. Well, and what a bizarre way to conduct a war. I mean, in hearing you just even relate in the initial description of the strategy or lack thereof, you know, in not capturing territory, because I can remember I was in public relations for the Marine Corps, so I got information, I got stories, I talked to the soldiers when they came back, you know, from being in country. And the frustrating thing for them repeatedly, I got to tell you, James, is they would say, you know, one day we would fight, we would lose our best friends that were right next to us, winning this hill, and then we would recede, only to come back the next day to go and win that same hill over again. How frustrating do you think that is for a soldier?
And, you know, the Marines and soldiers always say, well, you know, we got together and we got in a group, then we went out, and then we got ambushed. And they got some of our guys and we came back. No, 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 no. It wasn't ambush. That was a strategy. Ho Chi Minh said, you're never going to confront the Americans head on. You're going to lose.
That's right.
He said,
Exactly.
what you do, he said, the Americans move in bunches. And when you see them moving in bunch one way, you know where they're going. And he
Right.
said, what you do is you ambush them. He said, you never get together with more than 10 or 15. And so you can hide behind the trees, in the brush and whatever. And you nick them. He said, if you cut off the pinky, just nick off the pinky of one Marine in a platoon, that blood will be seen by everybody. There'll be a report. They will be spooked. He said, that's a victory. But
Yes.
Bill, could I say something that the key to a boxing match is initiative. An initiative is I hit you first and you react, and then I hit you again and you're reacting. I have the initiative. And the key to a football game is to get the initiative, control the ball,
Right.
the plays, you know, throw a pass, do a run, mix it up, initiative, initiative. And when I went to Vietnam, and well, when I was in America and interviewed Marines, I never heard the word initiative. I heard, you know, our guns and our armor, and they moved out in groups. There was no initiative. When I went to Vietnam, they said, oh, Uncle Ho said, never fight without the initiative. Look for look for the corner in the alley when the Marines come around that you'll be able to surprise them. That's called initiative. Look for
Right.
the valley where you're on the other side and the Marines come and you can surprise them. That's called initiative. And if you can't get the initiative, don't fight. So
Right.
they were always looking. Well, the statistics show that the Marines initiated only 10% of the battles in Vietnam.
Unbelievable.
So
That's
you can't win.
no,
So
there's
90,
no.
so the Vietnamese and then the Marines would complain, we got ambushed and we started shooting and then they disappeared and they dragged their wounded. Well, no, the Vietnamese grabbed the initiative, drew first blood, and then they got out of there. Quick attack,
Right.
quick retreat, and they were taught as kids, quick attack, quick retreat, quick attack, quick retreat. Get out of there. And so the Marines were stunned and the Vietnamese got out of there. They weren't
Right.
looking to fight any battles.
We
The Vietnamese didn't want to fight a battle. They just wanted to ambush and surprise.
Exactly. James Bradley, we've got to go to a quick break. Stay with us. We got more coming up right after this. Hey, we're back with you. I'm Bill Martinez. It's 14 minutes before the top of the hour. James Bradley, New York Times best-selling author of Flags of Our Fathers. We're talking about his new book and what was behind it. I mean, gosh, I think you're the only author I know of that actually went to Vietnam, went there and actually had conversations with the Vietnamese to find out what the heck happened. And I got to tell you, your book is going to be disturbing in many regards for Vietnam vets who were in country. They knew kind of what happened. I think they have an idea of what happened. Like you said before, shoulda, coulda, woulda. It didn't happen. We weren't gaining territory. They thought, well, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, here's this, powerful military force. In fact, we just won World War II. And many wondered, said, why didn't we just drop a nuclear bomb on Vietnam and just take care of it, right?
I still have military people saying, "Oh, we could have genocided them." No, no, geez. The Vietnamese beat the Chinese for 1,000 years. The Chinese tried to destroy the Vietnamese, and it didn't
Right.
work. The French, the Japanese starved them to death. We put in chemicals, napalm, Agent Orange to deform them. We dropped more bombs on a little tiny area of Vietnam the size of Delaware than we did in all of Germany.
Think about
We
that.
really,
That's
really,
crazy.
really tried. And you know
Right.
what? Drop some nuclear weapons. I went to school in Japan. If you go to Hiroshima, where we dropped that bomb, there's a
Yes.
children are playing on a swing set there. You know,
Yeah.
Nagasaki, there's flowers growing there. So you can drop nuclear bombs, and as like Mao said, you're going to rearrange some dirt on some farms.
Mm.
Vietnam had no big industrial capacity for a nuclear bomb to affect.
Right.
What are you going to do? Dropping up, I mean, it's ridiculous. No, see, I feel like I'm going to bring comfort to the American vet because
Mm.
they were told, look at our aircraft carriers and look at our helicopters and look at our guns. We should have won.
Right.
No, they didn't look at the strategy of People's War and say, this is why we lost. The
Right.
Packers won because they had a better strategy. And the
Mm.
Vietnamese won because they had a better strategy and they had better tactics. But the
Mm.
Americans, not the service people, were fine. It's the generals and the
Exactly.
leaders.
Yeah. The ones that were in the Pentagon that weren't in country and trying to orchestrate this war from a distance. And lest we forget, the Vietnamese also had the hometown advantage, didn't they? In much the
You
same
know,
way in the Revolutionary War, when we took on the British, we knew the forest from the trees. So we had the advantage of locality, and I believe the Vietnamese had that advantage as well.
I was in Afghanistan before America invaded Afghanistan. And
Mhm.
I was in the villages of Afghanistan. And I'm like, wow, man, I can see why the British lost here, why the Russians lost here.
Mhm.
Nobody is ever going to beat the Afghanis.
Mhm.
They've been invading Vietnam for over 2,000 years. And Bill, the Vietnamese today have the largest army in the world if you include reserves,
Hmm.
the largest army today, but they're
Yes.
watching all their borders. See, they're not invading other countries. If Vietnam invaded Texas tomorrow, they would lose. The
Yes.
Texans would fight to the death to protect their homes.
Right.
But we invaded Vietnam and they had a strategy how to trip us up. The females fought. I had women say to me, Mr. Bradley, the Chinese came, we beat them. The Mongols came, we beat them. The French came, we beat them. The Japanese came, we beat them. Americans came. You know why, Mr. Bradley? I said, why? They said, because you only send half your strength. You only send your men. In Vietnam, the women fight. And I was asked if I wanted to meet a top sniper, a bemedaled sniper. So I
Uh-huh.
thought I'd meet this grizzled old guy. I opened the door and it's a 65-year-old female school teacher. She's the sniper. She said, Mr. Bradley, when I was 15, I saw a Marine shoot my father to death. And that's when I promised myself I would kill every American I ever saw. Well,
Mm.
at that point, she was a little farm girl. She had no intention of fighting a war, but she knew who the enemy was. He was a Marine. He killed my father. I'm going to fight. She went to the forest. Ho Chi Minh had a plan. He trained her. I mean, his people trained her. She
Hmm.
came back and boom, boom, boom. 5 of the Marines whose names are on the Vietnam Wall, she got shot by a
She
little
took
girl
out.
up in a
Mm.
tree, with her feet, with no sandals on, with her feet gripping the tree, waiting for her shot. So you can't. I'm from Wisconsin, and if you invaded Wisconsin,
Yeah.
what a joke. All
Right.
us kids, we'd trip you up in the backyards. We knew
Right.
all the nooks and crannies.
Yeah, exactly. If I can take a sidebar, just let's just take a little detour here for just a moment, because I want our audience. I mean, you've referred to some of the things in your life. I mean, your life is almost like Walter Mitty. I mean, as we mentioned, you're carrying a golf bag for Lombardi. You've traveled around the globe, self-funded. You visited, I guess now it says 22 countries. It's probably more than that by now.
No, no,
Uh,
no. I was in 22 countries by the time I was 22.
all right. So by the time you're 22, you're visiting all these. I mean, this is amazing. I mean, what motivated you to go and travel the globe like this, James?
You're old enough to remember the number one best-selling novelist of our youth was James Michener.
Mm,
And when I was a kid, Michener wrote about Asia.
right.
And I didn't know where Asia was. I was in northern Wisconsin. And then I saw he wrote an article for college kids. He said, when you graduate from college at 22, they'll ask you, what do you want to do with your life? He said, it's a great question. Answer it when you're 35. He said, go fool around, travel the world, live it up, do what you want. And then at 35, so I thought of that and I started hitchhiking around my hometown. I eventually hitchhiked across the United States. And then I went to school in Japan, in Tokyo, and I
Uh-huh.
hitchhiked around the world. I went on the hippie trail. I was in Afghanistan. I lived in the Gulf of Siam on an island with no, I was the only foreigner. I
Uh-huh.
I met the Shah of Iran's wife in Iran, taught English in Iran, was up
Mhm.
in the Himalaya. So I had traveled
Yeah,
and
and then
then
you and
I
then you dan and then you dance with Tina Turner while you're in Tokyo, right?
danced with Tina Turner in Tokyo, and yeah, I had drinks with Elton John. There were very few foreigners in Tokyo back then. I
Uh-huh.
hitchhiked around the world for $2,000, That was a lot of money back in 1974. And I
Uh-huh.
sold pots and pans in Italy and Germany, and then I eventually got a degree in Wisconsin, went to New York, got into the entertainment business, Tony Bennett, Ella Fitzgerald, Jay Leno. But eventually I realized I wasn't a good businessman. And I sold out and I went up to Mount Everest with 3 yaks and a tent. And I said, I'm not coming down till I figure out what to do. And up at Mount Everest, there's no oxygen, there's hardly any
Right.
food,
Yeah.
and I found one grimy book slammed against this wall of this sooty tea house. And it was a book by Dick Francis, the English author. He's Queen Elizabeth's favorite author,
Mm-hmm.
writes about horses. And he wrote that he was a jockey and he got hurt and he picked up a pen and started writing books, and you can too. So I'm up in the middle of nowhere looking for a second wind of my life. And I
Yeah.
thought, well, maybe I can be an author. So from that day when I decided to become an author, it took me 10 years, 27 turn downs. But my first book was Flags of Our Fathers. Steven Spielberg and Clint Eastwood made the movie. And now This Precious Freedom is my fifth book.
Mm-hmm. Wow. What a journey. And there you are on top of, on top of the mountain. And just, you're almost like, are you like stubbornly looking to God and saying, I'm not getting off this mountain until you tell me what it's all about and what I'm supposed to do? I kind of sense that. Is that what you did?
Yeah, I'm more like stubbornly like I really tried to do really well and it didn't work out. So I decided that, you can try to. My dad had been a businessman, so I became a businessman.
Mm,
And I hadn't become myself. And I realized I had to find my own path, but I didn't know how to find it in the noise of New York. So I just
right.
went up to Mount Everest where there's nobody to talk to, and all you have is the sun and the moon and the water and the slag heaps and the cold and the snow. And I thought, if I can't get inspiration here, it's not going to happen. But I'm
Right.
not coming down to get another job and do things that I don't want to do. And then this book came, and I thought, I could be an author. I could work alone. I could be creative. I wasn't
Mm,
a good manager. I wasn't a good businessman. If you manage people, you should be a good businessman. I
right.
wasn't. And if you're an author, you don't have to do business. You have an agent to do business. So I thought I could be creative, work alone. I had never imagined being an author, but
Mm-hmm.
I thought I'll give it a try. Well, that took 10 years. And, as a shirt wore out, I had one last shirt. When a sport coat wore out, I had one last sport coat. I
Yeah.
completely going broke. I had 27 turn downs on Flags of Our Fathers.
Mm,
27 publishers wrote me letters saying that Flags of Our Fathers was a dud. And I was pitching it. This will be New York Times number one, not because of me, but
right.
the flag raising photo is the number one most reproduced photo in
Exactly.
history.
Right.
And I was calling everybody, this is going to be great. My wife at that time, oh my God, my friends flew in for a intercession. It was like I was an alcoholic who needed a, what do you call that? A
Yeah.
intervention.
Intervention. Intervention. Yeah.
James, my friend Peter, James, don't you think the publishers know what they're talking about? You got to give it up, James. Get a job, you know? But I kept going because it wasn't because of me. I just thought this is a good story and
Right.
and people are interested in it. See, the flag raising has 6 humans and nobody ever wrote a book about those humans because those families wouldn't talk to anybody. But they
Mm,
had to talk to me because my dad was involved. So I
yes.
broke down their doors and said, tell me the family stories. And they said, well, my brother wasn't a hero. And I said, don't give me that. I heard that from my dad. What I want to know, did he ever kiss a girl? Did he have a girlfriend? Did he play football? I wanted the family stories to rebuild these guys. And that's the
Exactly.
book. But it's the same thing that happened in Vietnam. I went Bill, I must have read 200 books about Vietnam before I went there, the Vietnam War. And I
Mm,
interviewed American veterans of Vietnam War, one of them my brother. And then I go to Vietnam, and what the Vietnamese are telling me what happened, I can see they're taking me out to the battlefields, and I'm
right.
like, wow, this is the opposite of what Ken Burns and Walter Cronkite told us. You know?
Exactly. Exactly. Well, James, I'll tell you, I cannot thank you enough. Precious Freedom, a novel. I know that Vietnam vets are going to be greatly blessed by this because you bring a fresh, needed perspective on this. And though it is a novel, And I understand because some people, I guess this would be in the category of fiction, but there's so much in this novel that comes from real life experience. And I know that the soldiers are going to see it and discern it for themselves. So again, thank you for coming on the show, James Bradley, author of A Precious Freedom, the book available now at all the usual places, and the website they can go to, James.
JamesBradley.com. Visit me there.
Gave you the last word. That's perfect. Thank you, James. Take care. Have a good one. Good morning, America. 6 minutes after the top of the hour right now. Bill Martinez here along with James Bradley. Yes, he is back with us. He's the author, of course, Precious Freedom. And we had, I'll tell you, it was really an honor, James, to talk to you and get to know you a little bit more the last time and talk about your background and of course, your dad, who was associated. He was Iwo Jima Corpsman, right? Doc Bradley himself, right?
Yes, sir. Brought to the screen by Steven Spielberg and Clint Eastwood.
Yeah.
Flags of Our Fathers.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah, exactly. And of course, all inspired because of your book, Flags of Our Fathers. And of course, this new book about the Vietnam War, A Precious Freedom. It's a novel, New York Times, from the New York Times, #1 best-selling author, the one and only, James Bradley. And hey, he's acquiesced and join us now to talk about, what's going on with Zelensky and Putin. James, my assessment is that it seems like Donald Trump wants peace more than Zelensky or Putin does right now. Am I misreading something?
In Precious Freedom, this book about the Vietnam War, Lyndon Johnson never said he wanted war. He wanted peace all the time. It was always peace and peace plans, and we're reaching out and we want them to come to the negotiating table. But all along, he was upping the military equipment, giving more money to Lockheed, Bell Helicopter, Raytheon. So, we're after peace in Ukraine, and we've given them what, $300 billion?
At least, yeah.
So Trump has increased the national debt $2 trillion since just last year. So I don't know. Americans have to wake up. We've got the best economy in the world, but we can't afford to pay our bills. We have to borrow money. And then we want peace, but we're sending money out. See, what I've learned is we're not sending money to Ukraine. We say we send money to Ukraine, and then we send it next. We send it next door to Lockheed.
Exactly. That's the way the wheels on the bus go round and round, James. You just follow the money, right?
Well, we got told by Eisenhower that we accidentally built this system where the military industrial complex was, I've been in the White House a number of times. If you look at Donald Trump, standing behind him is a statue, and the tallest guy on the statue is my dad. If you look at the statue, you can see my dad's acne. My dad posed for the statue. And, to Trump, that's all about courage and bravery. But I've been in the White House, in the Oval Office, and my idea of the president is he sits at his desk, and right outside, there's 7 lions out there with big mouths, and those are military industrial contractors. And he's got to throw them meat. They're the ones that pay it costs $1 billion at least to become a president. Who's paying those bills? It's huge government contractors. And, people think missiles and bullets. No, Apple Computer, Levi's, Burger King, Starbucks. These are major military industrial contractors that are on the government tit. And you got to feed them because they get everybody elected.
Yeah. Well, and that's exactly right. With Trump has probably been one of the most independent presidential candidates in our lifetime. He didn't necessarily rely on corporate money, but unfortunately, the thing that operates in DC, as you say, are all these individual interests, these elected officials that are tied to all these corporations that, number one, must get reelected. That is their mission du jour. It is not serving the American people. It's about getting reelected. So yes, the hounds of DC are constantly barking around that Oval desk.
I wish Americans could have lived with me over the past 10 years. You know, I lived in Saigon, and Saigon has a higher quality of life than San Francisco. So my friends in San Francisco say, look at our GDP, look at the Vietnamese GDP. They must be poor, we must be rich. In Vietnam, a girl in a miniskirt can walk around at 2 a.m. in the morning. She's not going to get harassed.
Right.
So, you know, I wish Americans could come with me to Beijing and Moscow. Moscow is an art-filled, beautiful, safe city. Yeah. Beijing, man, they are not stealing Federal Express packages off of people's back porches in Beijing like they are in America. Right. You know, I wish Americans would look at the system that we're in and the quality of life. How's your quality of life? There's no homelessness in Vietnam. I'm in the island of Mauritius right now. This is part of Africa. I've been here 2 years, haven't seen a homeless person. You know?
What about drugs?
Well, drugs are everywhere, but not on the street, sleeping in the street drugs.
Not being zombied out and
no.
Yeah.
No. See, Vietnam has the largest military in the world if you include reserves. It does. I can send you the stats. Yeah. And that military is watching the border. So you're an illegal alien or you're bringing in drugs, you're going to talk to the Vietnamese military. So yeah, there's some drugs everywhere in the world, but not sleeping on the street drugs.
And I don't think Vietnam worries about a two-tap offensive, right? If they do a second tap on somebody who's going to try to criminalize their population, right?
But they're inside the borders. Right. If you look at Eisenhower and Patton, where did they spend most of their career? Inside the United States, guarding the American borders, watching the Mexican border. We should have the U.S. military, instead of 1,000 bases around the world, we could have that military up on the Canadian border, up on the Mexican border, shut this drug down, the illegal immigration down, have a nice, clean, safe country like the one you and I grew up in.
Exactly. No, it's a matter of commitment. And there's no doubt, James, you and I talked about this before, the nefarious forces that have come in and have influenced policies in our country have brought us to this level. And so the American people need to decide, is it worth it? And as you say, you wish you could take Americans with you to these other countries and their perception would think, well, Vietnam's got to be some kind of loser country now or, whatever. And then they go, wow, the women get to walk around late at night and have a sense of safety. Okay, what's operating in Vietnam that's not operating here in America? That's a good point.
So my book, Precious Freedom, really shows the change in America. When you and I were kids, we trusted our government because they basically told us the truth. Right. And we weren't out building this empire.
We had media also that would hold them accountable to keep the truth. But unfortunately, the media surrendered and they sided with the Democrats and they turned it into a propaganda machine.
Well, it's propaganda. It is definitely propaganda. And, in my book, the U.S. Marine Commandant David Shoup, Medal of Honor winner, Tarawa, says in the book, the media and the government has convinced Americans that communist means bad. And he said, that's why every day communist China, the CCP, communist China. Well, I don't know, really. If you look around China, go to Shanghai, Beijing, go to these cities. I wrote a book about China. Wow, the quality of life in China, what their money buys, the safety of the city. So they have a different system. Maybe it's not a system that we would like, but the idea that there's this good and this bad.
The results are there, right? Anyway, we got to go to a quick break. We got more from James after this. Stay with us. Welcome back. Bill Martinez here with the New York Times best-selling author of Flags of Our Father. James Bradley is with us. His new book, Precious Freedom, it's a novel and a great story about Vietnam. I'm telling you, you've got to get your hands on it. It will enlighten you, and especially, for Vietnam friends, Vietnam vets, my friends who served during Vietnam as I did. As admittedly as I say, I didn't go in country. I stayed here Bayside, but I was there during the Vietnam era, so I saw a lot of the residual up close. Not quite as personal as my brothers did, who were in country, and of course my other friends and other Marines, particularly because I served in the Marine Corps. But of course that includes the Army, everybody else, the Air Force that was involved as well. But anyway, James continues with us, and James, as you said, you look at what the communists have done, and you like the outcome, but how do you fit what the communists have done in terms of outcome with a constitutional democratic republic?
You don't, because they're not communists. They have an emperor system. They have a family emperor system. To get into the Communist Party, I mean, how is China communist when it's creating more billionaires than anybody in the world? You know what I mean? But I wanted to make a comment on this, on you talking about the press. I went back to Vietnam and I interviewed people who got shot, by the Americans, fought the Americans, and they said, "Oh, welcome, we love Americans." And I said, I look like the guys who shot you. And they said, "Oh, Uncle Ho said not to hate the Americans." I said, "How do you not hate the Americans? They killed your father and your sister." And they said, "Oh, no, 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 no. Uncle Ho said the American soldier, we should feel sorry for him because his government is lying to him. Uncle Ho said these soldiers, Americans, they don't want to come to Vietnam and fight, but the government's lying them into Vietnam. And so we are a victim of the U.S. government, and so are they." So they made an empathy bond with them. It's unbelievable.
Oh, yeah, that's crazy. Yeah.
If you go back to America, a guy looking like you and me, we look like the enemy.
Yeah.
Oh my God, we're the most popular foreigner in Vietnam.
Yeah, that's incredible. But again, I just want people to understand here, because it's not like you're being an advocate for communism, are you? I mean, you are.
No, what I'm saying is it's not communism. We're putting the name, David Shoup, the Marine, said we put this word communism on it. They have an emperor system. It's an Asian family system. Look back to the emperor system. So the emperor is the emperor for some reason and has a bunch of advisors, and then these advisors, okay, well, the people have the mandate of heaven. And what that means is if the emperor's screwing up, if there's war and poverty and things aren't going right, they can kick them out. It's not communist control in China. What the ruling party with the word communism, but take that off of there. If you look at the emperor has a deal with his people. I'll increase your quality of life. I will make more people come into the middle class than has ever happened in the history of the world. I will make the streets clean. I'll give you 400 kilometer an hour trains. I'll give you this, I'll give you that, and then I'll rule. But you'll stay out of politics. My job is politics. Your job is being a citizen and be a good citizen. But in America, we think freedom is the right to stand and yell about the president on a street corner. But where's it getting us? But anyway, we have different systems. But China, communists, the Vietnamese personal income doubled in the 10 years I was there, Bill. That's a communist country? No, it's an emperor country, and it's being run like it has for thousands of years.
And China, the same thing with President Xi, is what you're saying, is that we're malinformed. Let's put it that way. You're there on the ground and you've seen it in operation. So you're telling us something, different than what, we have come to understand. And like you said, we've all put it under that title of communism, but not necessarily so.
I'll tell you a story. My friend one day came and slammed her fist. "We're not going to let the Chinese take our country." And I'm like, what? And then there were riots in Ho Chi Minh, and the police were pushing back the rioters, and they were flipping police cars over in the middle of Vietnam, catching them on fire. Huge riots all over Vietnam. Why? Because the Hanoi government said to China, you can have 3 economic zones, and these will be Chinese. And the Hanoi government agreed. The people rioted, hit the streets, and guess what? The Hanoi government backed off and said no to China. So, there's a mechanism that they have to listen to their own people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So
I saw the riots, Bill. I saw the people demonstrating. They are not shy about telling the government what they think, and the government better listen.
yeah, even at the peril of their own lives, as we've seen at times, right?
Well, I mean, we're shooting. Don't you remember Newark? We were shooting them dead in the street, Bill.
Yeah.
I mean, we got China and Vietnam don't have ICE agents all over the United States. Military guys with big. Imagine if every day you turned on TV and you saw Beijing with military guys with huge rifles. You'd think, oh, that communist system. But we put up with it in America. That's a democratic system with troops in the streets.
Yeah,
I don't like to see that. I don't like to see that.
That's because you're right, because that's because you didn't do your job in the first place. Because you didn't do your job in the first place, now you're cleaning up after the fact. And here we are. I mean, the numbers that we've heard in terms of illegal immigration, I mean, it started at 10 million. Now it's 15. Some are saying, 20 million, as many as 20 million illegal immigrants. These are new immigrants, James. These aren't, this isn't even counting probably the 25 million that were already here. So it's just one big hot mess. But anyway, I want to get back to, again, what's going on with Russia and Ukraine. Because I read this morning that that Zelensky hasn't even read the peace proposal. And here, we think we're coming, to the final chapter of this conflict, this war between Ukraine and Russia. And as you said, billions of dollars, not only America, 300 billion, but you got Europe's billions as well thrown into the mix. And so, it's just, unless you get to the point where Russia and Zelensky want peace more than Donald Trump, more than Europe, then, this is going to be ongoing.
Zelensky has nothing to do with this. Zelensky's a cocaine addict who's worried about his mansions in Miami and Monaco. And Putin is not going to negotiate with Zelensky. There's no Ukraine. The Ukrainian army's on its last legs. They're taking teenagers off the street. Ukraine is a hollowed out mess. And Putin could have taken all of Ukraine in one day. That's not what he's interested in. He's interested in those Russian republics right there that became part of.
Right.
Yeah, he wants to protect them. The Ukrainians were bombing. I had a friend go into a Ukrainian hotel, and the Ukrainians bombed, this Russian-speaking hotel. So it's a long story, but Obama overthrew the Democratic government in 2014. This is all CIA to push NATO up against Russia. Russia said, stop or we'll have to do something. I mean, right. Bill, if you take a gun to my front porch, I'll say back off. And if you don't, so Russia had to come out. Russia could have eliminated everybody in Ukraine in one day. They have hypersonic weapons better than ours that have nuclear effect without the radiation. But they didn't. They're not interested in taking Europe. But Europe is imploding financially. And the European leaders have no excuse. So they're ginning up this war fever, and that's what they're going to blame it on. The system, the fiat money system is falling down. That's the key. And then we're going to go to war, and the Federal Reserve and all the central banks are going to say, it wasn't our fault. We went to war. So they're going to take everybody's pensions away. If you have dollars and you don't have gold and silver, you're in trouble. The stock market's going to go down. And this is all going to have to be blamed on war by our incompetent leaders in the West. But how come this isn't happening in the East? In China, there's deflation.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's
Prices
a good point. Yeah.
prices are going down in China. Personal incomes are going up in Vietnam. The Mercedes and BMWs are popping up in Vietnam like tulips, you know. But Paris, they're rioting. There were riots all over Germany yesterday. We got American troops on. It's our the Western financial system is imploding, and they won't admit it.
Interesting. Stay tuned for details. James Bradley, number one, New York Times bestselling author of Flags of Our Fathers, his new book, Precious Freedom, a novel. It is a must read. And James, thank you so much. You bring so much to the conversation and experience because you've been there and you've been on the ground, and it's not theoretical. You've seen it for yourself. So thank you so much for sharing it with us. James Bradley, thank you. Take care. Have a great one.